So the Nintendo Entertainment System was launched in the US October 18th, 1985. And that was actually only came out in New York. And then I think a few weeks later they released some test units in Los Angeles too. And basically it was such a big hit that they had a nationwide release in February of 1986, which is 20 years ago, pretty much now.
Nintendo used Rob the robot to say, look, it's not a video game system, it's a robot toy.
Rob, my robot-operated buddy.
I actually had the robot, right? I had my Rob when I went to college, but we would use him to hold like beers and stuff. He had the tray. We just put our beers while we were playing Final Fantasy on Rob, and he was like our beer holder.
So the robot was good for a lot of other stuff, like picking up G.I. Joes and dropping them into vats of killer acid, big evil Cobra robot. That was pretty cool, but Gyromite's not so good.
I was one of those poor kids who didn't really have a whole bunch of accessories, so I kind of reasoned with myself that, you know, Rob was a dumb accessory anyway because I didn't have it.
Who doesn't like robots? Everyone loves robots. Everyone wants a robot toy. Check it out. Buy this thing.
The Zapper was great. I mean, it was like stock. You got a Zapper. It wasn't like one of those, oh, I gotta go buy a light gun. You had the Zapper. You had the one light gun that you used for everything.
This to me was the most amazing piece of technology ever at the time. I could point this at the screen and then it would shoot stuff on the screen, and that made no sense to me as a child that could work. But it sold me.
I don't know what this orange Zapper business is all about, because I had the original gray Zapper.
But I still don't approve of this awful orange. It's like the other one was gray and white. Who thought that? What sort of gun manufacturer is making guns that look even remotely like the old Zapper?
I really liked Hogan's Alley. A lot of people like Duck Hunt. Duck Hunt ain't all that.
I was just so stoked about the fact that I could sit there and shoot this at the screen and the ducks would die, and that was awesome.
You know, I got some rounds of Duck Hunt in.
Sucker ass bird. What?
You gotta blast that stuff. You gotta peel Cap's back.
I wanted to shoot the dog, but...
Could you shoot the dog in Duck Hunt? No? No. That's disappointing.
I just really wish that thing actually worked on the dog, and I still kind of do.
I'd like point the gun at the dog. Am I gonna pull the trigger? No, I'm not gonna pull the trigger on the dog.
The Power Glove was one of those things that you saw in magazines, and it just seemed like a bad idea right off the bat.
It was like this kind of holy grail of the NES, and everybody wanted one. Everybody wanted to see what it was like.
The Power Glove on its own was awesome.
I don't think I need to speak on the Power Glove. I think it speaks for itself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I was so excited to finally get a chance to check it out. And it was awful.
It took us like literally seconds to realize how completely worthless it was.
And then the second that you realized you had to put the pieces of plastic with the speaker looking things around your TV, you just knew it wasn't gonna work good.
Oh, the Power Glove. This is quite possibly the worst idea for a peripheral ever.
It still looks pretty fresh though. I mean, this one's kind of dirty.
This thing is so dirty, by the way. It is f***ing filthy. I'm gonna wash my hands after taking this thing off. This is nasty. It's like got butter on the inside of it. It's disgusting.
All these peripherals are just all crap. Anytime they try and decide like, oh, we need to change things up a bit, make something crazy, it's always garbage. Here's what you do. You put the game in, like so. You push it down. And that's it, really. If you were taking care of your business, that's all you had to do. If you were some kind of dirtbag that couldn't take care of a Nintendo, then that's when you had to do all kinds of unsightly business. I mean, everyone had to blow in cartridges and blow in here.
I know some people claim to have done voodoo dances or, you know, sacrifice goats to get their games to work.
The surefire way to make sure your NES games go.
I did the thing where you just kind of pulled it as far out as you could.
I would always have tricks of kind of sliding the cart a little bit to get the pins to line up a little better.
Wiggle it to the side.
And you push it in just as far as you can. So you try to put it up, no, not quite. Push it a little bit further.
But what you do is you just push such a way that it's sort of all the way to the back. You give it the extra little push to the back, and then you push it down.
Sometimes you have to, you know, tilt it up and down a few times.
It required a gentle coaxing in order to work.
Just blow it, you know, try to get some of that heat.
not going to do anything.
Blowing again. I mean, there's a whole science to this.
Do that about 50 times.
It works better when you have the Power Glove enabled.
That's how you make your NES games go.
I still have my original Nintendo from Christmas '85, and it still works. We can still push it down in there. It still works just fine. So my original NES still goes. So if yours doesn't.
I've never saved for anything, like, ever, but up to that point. Like, I was really bad with money, you know. It's like I would, save $20. I'd go, ooh, action figures for Mask, and then I would buy that, and I wouldn't have money anymore. And I scrimped and I saved for, like, my allowance for months, dying to get one. And I finally saved up $100, and I totally bought a NES.
The first money I ever earned as a kid, I quickly spent on a Nintendo Entertainment System. I won an art contest and got $100 for it, and I was like 10 or 11. I had to stand in front of this big crowd. They're like, what are you gonna do with the prize money? I said, I'm gonna buy a Nintendo Entertainment System. That's exactly what I did.
Here's my question. Why did everybody call the games tapes? Am I alone in this? Maybe it's just something from the South, but everybody called them Nintendo tapes. Have you ever looked at one of these things? There's no moving parts. There's no obvious tape anywhere. There's a circuit board in there. You see connectors. You don't see any tape. You don't see any reels. There's obviously no sound when you put it in that means that the tape's spinning or anything.
Getting games was a much more devious process back then. There was a lot more you could do to get your hands on some games if you wanted games.
If there's any criminal behavior in my past, it relates to how I procured new Nintendo Entertainment System games.
Because stores hadn't quite figured out how to work with video games. They all had these really open return policies. It was like, hey, 30 days, you don't like it, or whatever, if it's broken, I don't know, bring it back. So you just got on this kick where, it's like I would go buy Renegade, for example. I would play Renegade for about a week and then realize that game was crap. And then me and my dad would go back to Toys R Us or something, and we would, this game doesn't work, or we don't like it, or it didn't matter what you said then, because they're like, well, this is the policy. So you could kind of just long-term rent games.
They'd give you the same receipt, they just append to it.
But that was pretty much how it worked. You would go and you would return games until you found one that you felt was worth actually hanging on to, or eventually the receipt that tracked all of this process got so long that you eventually kind of started feeling guilty about it, and you just be like, all right, I'll just keep this one.
But this receipt got to be very long, and I don't like confronting salespeople, so I got to be very embarrassed about this, but I had to do it. And then when the day came when they said, our satisfaction policy no longer applies to video games, I felt like I was probably personally responsible for that happening, but the reality is I probably wasn't alone.
I did the whole deal where I would make friends so that I could, borrow their NES games and then forget to give them back.
I would rent a game from them, and if I really enjoyed that game, what I would do was I would gingerly peel off the label and replace the label with a game that I really didn't like. I would rent POW, and I would return Amagon. This actually worked for a while until I got caught, and that was a learning experience for me.
The NES, I think, inspired a lot of really violent activities. It's probably good that it's not around as much today, because I think there'd be a lot more conflict in the world.
I guess I had emotional problems when I was younger because I would get really pissed at my NES when I would lose a game, and so I would beat the crap out of it, right?
I have absolutely no idea how long I played my NES. I do know that I ended up with many, many bad cases of NES thumb. I guess that's when you have the actual imprint of the button on your thumb, and your thumb really hurts because you've been, either jumping a lot in Super Mario Brothers, or you're playing pro wrestling and just hammering that button to try to grab the other guy, something like that. But I played that unhealthy amounts of my NES, and looking back, I wonder if I could have spent some of that time studying or something like that. But yeah, I guess it's all water under the bridge now.
I had a fat stack of Nintendo Powers.
If you played Nintendo when you were like 1985, 1996, you had Nintendo Power. That was part and parcel.
And yeah, that was a great magazine at the time, because for most kids or anyone in general, there weren't too many sources for game information.
You know, you'd see Howard Phillips in there with his bow tie on, and he'd be playing slalom, and you wouldn't get to play slalom for like 3 years. So you'd be really excited when slalom finally came out, and you'd be like, oh man, slalom's crap. Oh, bummer.
I had a subscription to Nintendo Power fully. I had issue 1, the crazy clay version of Mario with the wrong colors being chased by Wart for Super Mario Brothers 2.
It's weird, when they first started advertising it, they had 2 different covers. Like there was like the first cover for Nintendo Power was like this claymation Mario. But they actually had another version of that cover that was just like standard Mario art. So at some point they did that, and then someone like in some boardroom somewhere went, you know what would really make this cover pop? We got like some clay and made like a clay Mario, like it was real, man. And that's been bothering me ever since that came out. Like the discrepancy between the cover they showed in the ads and stuff and what really came out. That keeps me awake at night a lot.
Issue after issue, they had something in there about Golgo 13. I don't think I ever would have known about Golgo 13 and my man Duke Togo were it not for Nintendo Power. So props to NP for that one.
Nintendo Power always really read like state-run press. You know what I mean? Like it was very much like, you know, the government owns this press outlet, and they are feeding it the propaganda, and you know, the people who report this need not bite the hand that feeds, lest they find themselves in the dungeon somewhere. The Nintendo game counselors were an interesting bunch. They were always very polite, you know, even though some, you know, dumbass 7-year-old is calling up saying, I don't understand how to make the thing go in the thing. I can't kill the giant scorpion. What do I do?
Their job was to not hang up on you unless you got abusive or whatever. So you could call up the gameplay counselors and be like, here's what I did at school today. And they'd be like, oh, that's great. You know, it was like this weird, like, it could be like your phone friends. I imagine they really wouldn't cut you off once it went to a 900 number, because then at that point you're paying. It's like some creepy precursor to phone sex or something, where it's like, so you'll be my friend. Everybody else beats me up, but you got my back, Nintendo gameplay counselor.
Fully grown adults, I guess, paid like an actual wage to be phone game counselors. You would see on TV there were commercials that would say, kids, get your parents' permission before you call. It's $2 a minute to get tips on how to pass level 6 in Zelda.
I have to imagine that was the worst job in the world.
I imagine that everyone who worked that phone line must have like a billion crazy stories of kids calling them up with like just ridiculous trouble. Like, mommy keeps hitting daddy. Well, have you tried calling the police? I have to imagine that they must have had like the big binder, or the big computer system that had like, you know, passwords for Kid Icarus must have had a section marked domestic abuse, what to do when. You know, I was like, my uncle keeps saying he has a joystick. It's like, whatever. Like, there's all kinds of. They must have just had weird alternate cases in there or something.
I ate me the hell out of some Nintendo cereal, and I think I'm sterile because of it. Because that stuff, I'm pretty sure, was made from cardboard and ground up hobos. Like, I don't think that was like anything that any human being should have been eating.
Commercials for a lot of that stuff, for a lot of the Nintendo games, were not so great. I think the one that sticks out in my mind is probably the one that sticks out in everyone's mind. It's like the Zelda commercial with them going, Octoroks, levers! Like, that's probably the crowning achievement for Nintendo ad design.
Oh my god, the Legend of Zelda commercial for the NES, all time one of the worst commercials ever. Total, like, they had a cool guy and a nerdy guy, and they were sitting down and playing Zelda, and then they start rapping. Oh my god, the Legend of Zelda is really rad. These creatures of Ganon are really bad. And it goes on from there, and it is terrible. It is the most excruciating 30 seconds of footage you will ever see.
I remember really liking the first like teaser commercial for Super Mario Brothers 3, where you had people shouting Mario, 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 and it's like he shows a bunch of different people, and then it pans out, and there's like a giant 3 on the earth. It was, you know, when I'm 8, that's totally exciting to me.
I was actually going through this journal I had when I was in like 2nd or 3rd grade, and there's this Christmas list or whatever, and it's a letter that I've written to Santa into this journal, and it says, "Dear Santa, I would like," and you know, I guess I was a greedy kid, I just mentioned a whole bunch of games. I would like Super Mario Brothers 2, and I would like Zelda, and I would like Stinger, and I would like Contra, and I would like Joust, and in the bottom, I'm like, "Thank you very much, you know, sign to Carrie," and then I was like, "Now you're playing with power." I don't know why I felt the need to tell Santa that, but Santa needed to know. Now he was playing with power. He was playing with the NES. It's so bad.
I think in most ways, Super Mario Brothers was the definition of games for most people. It's like you associated Mario Brothers and Nintendo with video games like you did, you know, Oreos with the cookies.
The first Super Mario Brothers, I mean, that's why you bought a Nintendo, right? It's like you go into the Good Guys and they've got the big screen TV playing Super Mario Brothers.
I get it now. I get it. This is there's something to this whole Nintendo Entertainment System thing. It's not just this fad.
You know, you'd been playing arcade games, or maybe you had a 2600, but you'd never seen anything quite like this, you know, on a home television. The look of the game, just the creativity of the different levels. When you first play through that game, every level is totally startling and mind-blowing with how unique it is and fully realized. I mean, it's a genre starter for a reason.
The way the game played was so tight. It was just so much fun just to kind of, you know, just jump through these levels. It was all really challenging, really fun, and kind of stressful at times. It was one of those games that like you could easily get real frustrated, but yet at the same time, you don't want to stop playing because you're just like, you know, oh God, I gotta get to the next castle. I gotta rescue the princess. You know, it was probably the first one of those games I ever experienced. You play that game and it's sort of like, it's just kind of mind-blowing, you know, how weirdly addictive it can be just to kind of hop around and stomp on these stupid little creatures and punch bricks.
I loved shooting fireballs. That was great. That was a great little mechanic. Because Mario had been such a, you know, wuss for so long that all he could do was jump. Every once in a while he'd get a hammer. Now, I mean, you get that fire flower and it's on.
I remember being really blown away by the unlimited lives trick on the first level, just jumping on the Koopa Troopa over and over, and the minus worlds and all that. That like blew our young minds because we were like, why would they put an infinite number of levels in there, but they're hidden?
You know, everyone kind of had their own rumors. You know, there was a lot of stuff spreading, especially after people found the minus world.
There'll always be that one kid at school who's like telling you, "Oh, I made it to negative land."
I always tried to jump over the flagpole. I thought there had to be a way to do it.
This guy that I was friends with, I told him that I was able to jump over the flagpole in one of the levels, and that's how you get to the second minus world. And he actually spent apparently like 2 nights after he got off work, working on this before I finally told him, "Nah, I was just messing with you, dude."
That game obviously had a lot to it and has some of the most memorable music of any game ever.
And you got to do it like jazz, right? So yeah. I was in a Fry's recently, and they had this big grand piano in the middle of the store, a guy in a suit, and he was playing the Mario theme, and it was being piped up over the speakers throughout the entire store, and everybody just had this stupid grin on their face. I mean, that's you know, the Mario theme is embedded in the American psyche at this point.
Super Mario Brothers 3 really took the whole Super Mario Brothers concept to a whole new level.
You know, it was bigger than the original Super Mario Brothers. They had more talents that you could have. The levels were bigger. There were more secrets to it. I mean, it's the perfect game as far as a platformer goes, and it's still my personal favorite, hands down.
Super Mario Brothers 3, it really was like the perfect sequel to Super Mario Brothers. Because Super Mario 2, fun game, not really the same thing. You know, it was kind of a different deal. And Super Mario 3, it was like, it felt like a much more natural progression from the first game.
The game was just so out there because you could still throw fireballs and stuff like that, but suddenly you had Tanuki Mario, and no one knew what the hell a Tanuki was, but it looked like a raccoon, whatever.
Kuribo's shoe is like the coolest suit or pickup ever in a game, ever.
Favorite suit? Well, I mean, who doesn't? Stupid people. Stupid people don't like Kuribo's shoe.
Tanuki suit, hello.
in the frog suit and all that crazy stuff that was just, you know, it kind of added some new dimensions to the whole game that really kind of just made it a lot deeper and a lot more fun to play.
You get the Hammer Brothers suit at like 1 or 2 points in the game and you get hit, you know, 5 seconds later and you lose it, but it's amazing. You were a Hammer Brother for about 5 seconds and it was all worthwhile.
People are saying something other than Karibo's shoe? They're all fired. What?
I was really excited about Super Mario Brothers 3 long before most people were, in that I was excited about it even before I stood in line to see The Wizard so that I could see more of it.
Yes, I will freely admit I went to a movie theater and plopped down money and saw The Wizard.
That game, living in San Francisco, in Japantown, they were actually showing footage of that game being played basically start to finish. And I would sit there riveted watching this, like, you know, hours of footage of this game, freaking out, wondering when am I going to be able to play this.
If I remember correctly, I think I got Mario 3 as a reward for getting straight A's on my report card. I mean, yes, it must have been straight A's, of course, because I was a perfect student and I didn't waste all my time playing video games or anything. But I remember the day after I got it, getting up at like 5 in the morning just so I could play the game even more before I had to go to school. It was that revolutionary and that engrossing and addicting. At the time that it came out, there were no platformers even close to the depth of Mario 3, so you could just lose yourself in it for hours.
Super Mario Brothers 3, when that came out, I put my name on a waiting list to rent it, and I called in sick to school for like the next 3 days after that. I had beaten it after the second day, I think, but I figured, you know, why, you know, I got a good thing going. My mom was into it, into letting me stay home for the rest of the week. I'm not really sure if she would, like, I mean, she had to have known why I was doing it, but at the same time, maybe she just really wanted to believe that I really was sick. I don't know.
People are going to tell you that The Wizard was garbage. The Wizard was not garbage. The Wizard was an amazing movie. And The Wizard was an amazing movie if for no other reason than the fact that you got to see Super Mario Bros. 3 months before it came out.
And you wanted to see Super Mario Bros. 3 more than you wanted to have fingers.
You know, I planned ahead. I was like, okay, I got my tickets for this thing. You know, arranged that, like, have my parents drive me and my best friend there, and we're going to watch this movie. And it was awful.
God, what a terrible movie The Wizard was. The Wizard is, like, without a doubt, like, the just most stupid movie ever made.
Dude, you got 50,000 on Double Dragon?
Never saw The Wizard. I never once saw The Wizard. Yeah. I never wanted to.
Plus, the movie made the Power Glove seem cool, which is the farthest thing from the truth.
I love the Power Glove. It's so bad.
At the same time, the greatest movie ever made because it is so just blatantly a big Nintendo advertisement. And the fact that someone at Nintendo was actually able to convince a film studio to, or, you know, hire a screenwriter to write a script and, like, make this movie with, like, Fred Savage of all people in it. And, you know, it like, mind-blowing.
It just looked so bad. I think I was already pretty sick of, like, being marketed to and all that stuff. So when they were just like, "Oh, you damn video game kids are gonna love this. Fred Savage is in it." It's like, well, I hate the Wonder Years.
Good old Fred Savage and his autistic brother. It's basically like Rain Man for kids.
I guess that movie didn't do a whole lot for Fred Savage's career because look where he is now.
So I hate Fred Savage already, and I have already seen footage of Super Mario Bros. 3, so whatever.
And also a little bit of Wizard trivia. The girl who was the main, like, love interest in that film is the lead singer from Rilo Kiley. There you go.
The great thing about Punch-Out wasn't the gameplay, which was a lot of fun but pretty simplistic, but the greatest thing was just the personality, which absolutely oozed from every crevice.
It was easy to get into, and you could beat, you know, the first few guys pretty easily, but then once you got to, like, the third rank, it got really tough.
I mean, it wasn't a game that I could get way into, but it was a game I could always come back to, and it was always good fun.
There are few games in the NES catalog that have a huger, more memorable cast of characters than Mike Tyson's Punch-Out.
I like was it Glass Joe? He was the first guy. So I knew I could take him down, no problem. I felt bad for him though. He was so easy to beat. And it's like, what are you doing, dude? You're old, you're feeble, you don't need to be in the ring with me. I'm young and spry.
I've got to say I love Soda Popinski. I know he had to be changed from Vodka Drunkinski, which is obviously really pretty cool. But Soda Popinski, even the G-rated version, was a pretty special guy.
Mike Tyson's Punch-Out is the best game ever made. No qualification, no best on this system, best on that, whatever, no. If you need more clarification on that, let me just sort of give you 2 words right here. Bald Bull.
The Bald Bull was just such a bastard in that game because he was like the showstopper halfway through. You got up to him and he took you down bad, and it took a while for you to be able to get past him.
But when Tyson came out, it was like Tyson, back in 1989, he would come out and he would rock your ass, and you had no idea the guy was ferocious.
When you got hit for the first time and went to the mat and didn't get back up, it was just like, thanks, Nintendo, But at the same time, it was like ultra cool because that's the way, bosses were back then. They were tough.
I could never beat Mike Tyson. Played that game for weeks, I'm sure, of real time, and Mike Tyson has always eluded me.
I got up to Iron Mike a whole mess of times. I fancied myself pretty good at video games, but I could never beat him, so he stands out in my mind as one of the most legendary video game bosses ever.
In retrospect, it's kind of ridiculous that Little Mac was fighting against dudes that he had to jump up to even hit their face. It seems kind of, unfair and unbalanced, but, he could keep his own, and he had Doc in his corner.
The other thing about Mike Tyson's Punch-Out is the relationship between Little Mac and Doc Watson, whatever. It was sort of a strange relationship. Doc puts Little Mac in that pink jumpsuit for training. I'm not really sure why.
Yeah, and there was always, it seemed like boxing games back then, there was always something weird going on in the corner. Like the trainer was always trying to pump you up, but he was doing it in a way that probably it wasn't very family friendly, He
never really gave him very good hints. He would say stuff like, join the Nintendo Fun Club today, Mac. And I'm not really sure how that was supposed to help Little Mac, but apparently that's the key to beating Tyson.
I think you talk to pretty much any nerd you've ever known in your life, and they'll tell you that their favorite NES game of all time was The Legend of Zelda, because it really was like sort of the ultimate culmination of basically all the kind of Dungeons and Dragons dork, nerdlinger kind of tendencies sort of wrapped up into one game.
I wanted to be the guy who stabbed weird things with swords, and killed the dragons and all that. That was my reality at the time.
Even today, when you see the new trailer for the new Legend of Zelda coming out, you kind of remember seeing that world, even though it was flat and you're looking top down on it. I know I did anyways. I imagined the world that we see today on the GameCube version. When I would play Legend of Zelda, that was the world I saw. I didn't see the little sprites and everything. I envisioned myself in that world, and that was the neat thing about the Legend of Zelda, is it had so much rich depth to it that you could easily get lost in the land of Hyrule.
But what was accomplished in Zelda, I didn't even think was possible. I mean, that was the kind of thing that was like where my imagination was going.
You're sort of the heroic, kind of sword-wielding little guy going after all these crazy monsters, going through these dungeons to rescue the Princess Fair, as a lot of those NES games sort of tend to be. It just had this sort of quality to it where it was like, kind of anybody could really get into that game, despite the fact that it did have that kind of, very standard fantasy trapping kind of thing going on. I mean, hell, my stepdad loved that game.
But the thing with Zelda is I really hated having to save up money for things. I would always get my shield eaten by likes and stuff, and you'd always have to go buy another big shield. So sometimes my dad, after I would go to sleep, he would go play and just earn hella money. So when I woke up, there would be more money there, and that was really handy.
Zelda was an awesome game, but you gotta have the gold cartridge. You gotta have the gold cartridge. If you don't have the gold cartridge, you ain't nobody.
For God's sakes, it has a gold cartridge and a battery in it. How cool is that?
Zelda was definitely cool. I liked the gold cartridge. It was one of those games that I happily bought with my own money, even though I was a little kid, and the idea of spending $40 on something was really terrifying.
So Legend of Zelda was the game I probably played more at one point in time than any other game, and it was awesome. You know, going into the dungeons, it felt like you had to, do some business when you were going in there. You had to kind of save yourself for those dungeons, because if you just jumped in, it was like right before dinner time or anything like that, you weren't gonna have enough time to get through it.
It was kind of a hard game for if you didn't have maps or like know where anything was. You could wander around that game forever and not figure out that you needed to bomb some random mountain to get to the next level.
One time by accident, I lit a bush on fire with the candle, and it opened up one of the secret passages. And I was like, oh my God.
It's like if you didn't have that Nintendo Power issue with the maps, you could spend a long time playing that game. But no, that game was a lot of fun.
My only really vivid memory of Legend of Zelda was when my neighbor Ian lent me his copy, and then I accidentally erased all of his finished quests. Like, you finish the game, then you can finish the game again. It's like he had gone through everything and, finished it all and got all the TriStar, and he was really proud of that, and then whoops, I erased it. I remember getting a really teary-eyed phone call from him days later. He was not too happy.
I actually figured out that if you entered Zelda as your name, you got to the second quest right away. I figured that out on my own. I think I was the first one ever in the world, ever. I figured that out on my own and actually called up Nintendo, but I was pretty stoked that I'd found this, and I was like, dude, check this out. And I laid it on them. They were like, yep. I'm like, all right, cool. I guess it's not so great, huh?
Mega Man 2 wasn't the first Mega Man, it wasn't the Mega Man where they established the formula, but it was definitely the definitive Mega Man.
That game, I spent a lot of time playing that game.
It's a phenomenal game, and it totally set the tone for every other Mega Man game.
I also spent a lot of time just watching the intro over and over.
It is really like the perfect Mega Man game, if there ever was one. It is like, hey, check it out. Great bosses, awesome level designs, cool weapons.
Even if you look back on it now, that game still actually looks pretty amazing, just the artwork in it and these huge, really cool looking characters.
The game had robot chickens and robot gorillas and robot rabbits.
I mean, it just was so much fun to look at, and all the different levels were so cool, and Quickman stage was so messed up and made you so angry, but you wanted to get through it and finish it.
Mega Man 2 was rad because they put in password stuff for it. In a lot of ways, I think I probably enjoyed the bosses in Mega Man 1 a lot more, but just because you had to do it all in one sitting and it was just so harsh, Mega Man 2 was kind of better by default.
Yeah. High quality box art for this game right here.
And the really, really horrible English translation in that game, that was something else too. I remember probably losing sleep trying to figure out whether it was Crashman or Clashman. I think the manual said Clashman and the game said Crashman. Neither one made sense.
Yeah, great stuff. A lot of that box art on those old games was awesome, I guess you could say.
Everyone has their own process, right, for like the best way to get through Mega Man 2. That's how you can tell it's a classic, because people have arguments not just about, oh dude, I beat this game, but how to beat the game.
As far as Mega Man games go, there really is nothing better than Mega Man 2.
Metroid. I didn't like Metroid. Isn't the one where it was a chick?
Metroid is crazy. That game...
Metroid was way, way ahead of its time, simply by virtue of the fact that it was completely non-linear.
Like, you look back on that now, and it just seems so insane. It's this huge world, there's no map, the instructions don't really tell you anything about what you need to do, where to go.
Metroid just gave you one gigantic planet to explore, and that was it. You could just go anywhere. You found weapons that naturally opened up new paths to new areas, but it was basically just a giant game of exploration, which was totally unheard of at the time.
There wasn't a whole lot like that. There wasn't a whole lot where you just continually, got tons of stuff and it was an action game to boot, right?
I can't imagine finishing Metroid unless I had a bunch of maps to go on. And
I think that's like a clear-cut case of how games, generally speaking, are easier now, is because that just wouldn't fly now. If someone said, here's an 8-page manual, here's go.
The other thing, looking back on that game, was it was cool that it was serious. Like, it had, you know, a real kind of science fiction feel to it, as opposed to the kind of comic booky other stuff that was on the system at the time.
Metroid meant something. Metroid was the game that felt serious back then.
I remember the long, boring codes for Metroid more than I remember any actual gameplay.
I must have had like 50,000 pieces of paper around my house with just all these numbers, you know, written on it. My parents thought I was totally insane.
The graphics in that game really bothered me. Like, I didn't understand what was going on with the main character. I thought it was some weird alien thing, and it took me a while to realize that it's someone running around in a suit. And then it was really cool to realize that it's actually a woman, and then it was kind of not cool to realize it's a woman in a bikini.
It's a girl, and you're feeling a bit weird, you know, and especially you're an adolescent here, and you already got the hormones and the weird feelings going on, and you just realize, I played the entire game as a girl, and you know, it kind of makes you question some things, really.
Dragon Warrior was awesome. That game was so cool.
Dragon Warrior is a notable RPG simply because it was the first big Japanese RPG to make it to America.
It was so different than everything else out there just because it was so much more involved and it had the slimes.
Dragon Warrior was really the first RPG that I ever played, and it took a while for me to get into it because the language is kind of dense for one thing. So I'm a little kid about 7 or 8 years old playing, and the king is talking like thee and thou and all this stuff. And
fortune smiles upon thee, thou hast found the torch. So you got to learn proper English along the way, which is nice.
The thing about Dragon Warrior is that it's really, I consider it to be the precursor for all console role-playing games. Stuff that Dragon Warrior did, 15 years ago or so, you'll still see in console role-playing games today.
It established that level grind really, really well, and basically role-playing games today, 20 years later, are still ripping off the original Dragon Warrior. It's definitely the game that defined that Japanese RPG blueprint of finding better stuff, getting stronger, fighting tougher and tougher monsters, and just putting you in that addictive loop.
Kind of got me hooked on RPGs just because it was an interesting concept that you could play and play and play and play, and then just turn it off and start back up, and you could keep going and continue the adventure.
By today's standards, Dragon Warrior seems kind of primitive, right? It's got these primitive NES graphics. You're only controlling one character, you're only fighting one monster. But for its time, it was a really, really long, lengthy, engrossing role-playing game.
Probably not as many people would have been exposed to Dragon Warrior as were if it weren't for this magazine right here, Nintendo Power, who ran a big promotion and actually gave away free copies of the game with new subscriptions. So you have to figure maybe they pressed far more copies of Dragon Warrior than they meant to or than the market would bear. So they kind of sent a bunch of them out there for people who just bought the magazine. But that was undoubtedly a lot of NES fans' first exposure to the Japanese RPG.
But yeah, Dragon Warrior was another one of those games where it just took so long to do it, and it's like back then it seemed like it was just like months or something you were toiling away at this game, and now you go back to some of these games and read a walkthrough and decide, well, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna play Dragon Warrior again, and 6 hours later it's like over, oh, huh. I guess I just wasn't real smart when I was a kid.
River City Ransom is one of the weirdest games ever, probably because it was one of the first games you could buy sushi in.
River City Ransom is all about eating food and getting the dragon kick.
It was this huge, crazy fighting game RPG.
River City Ransom was the game that Double Dragon probably should have been at home.
You basically had this kind of side-scrolling beat-em-up action of Double Dragon, but you also had this really weird sort of RPG layer.
It just felt so crazy because you were always going to shops and buying stuff.
It's such a great, crazy mishmash of things. The idea that you can build up your character, but it's still just a total beat 'em up, and then you hit the dude and he says barf.
And you beat people up and take their money and then go buy sushi, which made you tougher, which was really cool.
It's like they had the two-player stuff in there, and it was still like a really satisfying beat 'em up.
A lot of us got into that, but it was just really memorable just for a lot of the fighting action. You had you would go into stick Phil or the frat guy's turf or whatever, and they would speak complete gibberish when you would throw garbage cans or baseballs at them.
There's never been anything like that again, really. At least not that was nearly so much fun.
It's fun. It's crazy. It's you know, one of those beat 'em ups that actually stands up well to the test of time just because it has so many layers.
This is a spoiler for all you people playing River City Ransom, but you fight like the Lee brothers or something like that. I forget what they're called, but they're like the brothers Lee. They're these like school toughs. They're some of the toughest kids in school, and it busts out with the Double Dragon theme music when you fight them, and I almost lost it when I heard that because they threw in the Double Dragon reference right near the end, and it was just totally amazing.
You know, there really wasn't much video game football around when Tecmo Bowl kind of came out.
Tecmo Bowl was a game that came out back when you could actually still enjoy video game football.
Love Tecmo Bowl. 4 plays, that's all you need.
It definitely ain't anything even close to simulation, but it is also like stupid fun for what it is.
You know, people still refer to Tecmo Bowl as the best football game ever made. And it's like, because I think a large part had to do with because nobody wanted to deal with like safety blitzes and zone coverage and everything. They just needed the 4 plays and that was that.
I got to a point where I was so good at Tecmo Bowl that I basically couldn't be beaten by anyone that I was around. I was pretty tough.
The thing about the passing plays in the original Tecmo Bowl is that it was either an interception or a completion. There was like no drop passes generally.
But it was still really fun to just like back all the way up to the goal line and throw that pass that just goes the whole field and gets in a touchdown.
Tecmo Bowl, I mean, let's face it, it was a football game, and it had cutscenes in it, right?
And I had that cool little touchdown animation where they'd go up, and you'd have like right before the high five, then you'd have right after the high five, and there'd be a little like colored burst between them, like where the high five happened. There was like this explosion, and it was different for every team because they could only display so many colors, like the color of the explosion. So like for the 49ers, like red, for the Raiders, like black. It's ridiculous.
Contra. I played the heck out of Contra.
Contra. Who doesn't love Contra?
That was one of the games that I would just go back to and play all the time, even though I'd beat it like a million times.
Contra was one of those games, at least in my Nintendo catalog, that was one of the mainstays. Like, I could always go back to Contra if I needed to.
Contra was the first game that I got with my Nintendo.
The only reason I bought Contra as a kid was because I thought the blonde guy on the cover kind of looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
The guy on the cover of the Contra box is some kind of distant relative of Matt Rory, because it's just uncanny. It's just uncanny. You're looking at it and you go, he even has the same hairstyle.
You saw the movie Aliens, and then you saw these 2 dudes running around without shirts on and machine guns killing aliens. And well, the aliens kind of look like people, and they're called the Red Falcon or something like that. Who knows why?
You go through the level, you jump around, you gotta avoid the big red pellets, because those will mess you up bad.
You know, I was like, whatever, 7 years old. I didn't know any better. I just thought, cool looking box, whatever, and then I got it home, and unlike so many other games I bought purely off box art that turned out to be just total garbage, Contra is without a doubt one of the best NES games ever made.
Really what made that game fun was just all the firepower and all the crazy bosses.
That game, I mean, it was really simple. You ran around and you shot stuff, but it was just, like, it was one of the first games I remember as being, like, visceral. Like, every time you got shot and died in that game, you did this giant backflip and landed flat on your back. Like, it seemed like everything really hurt.
One thing I really liked about Contra is that even though you had to work together as a teammate, if you're playing multiplayer, you could also be a real jerk. Like that vertical level, all you're doing is just jumping up and jumping up and jumping up. Like, you could burn your teammate and he'd die, and that was just mean.
Contra was a 2-player game, but I wasn't really around a whole lot of people that really wanted to sit down and play 2-player simultaneous games. So I played Contra alone a lot. I could beat it probably 4 or 5 times with just the 30 lives they give you. So it's a pretty easy game. I don't know.
And I could actually beat the game without doing the 30 guy code, which most people couldn't. So I was, kind of proud of that.
And the first time I ever beat that game without using the Konami code was like the greatest day of my life.
I think I did eventually beat it with just the 3 lives or whatever that you get by default, but I mean, really, who played it that way? Like, once that code was out there, it was just like, whatever. What, I'm not even gonna. I don't need to say the code. Anyone watching this knows it already, and it's like so overdone. God.